Stephen became dangerous because he was good at more than bread. Dagon had seen this happen before. A man is useful in one room and people assume usefulness will stay where they put it. Count baskets, speak names correctly, carry bread, keep peace between widows and men who think administration is humility because they no longer hold the knife themselves. But Stephen's kindness had edges, not cruel edges, clear ones. He spoke in synagogues and courtyards with the same attention he brought to distribution. That unsettled people. Men tolerate practical wisdom from a servant if it remains practical. When the same man begins arranging scripture, history, accusation, and mercy with equal care, they discover he was never only carrying baskets. Rumors found Dagon before facts did. Rumors were faster because they traveled without shame. Stephen had argued with men from outside Judea. Stephen had blasphemed. Stephen had shone. Stephen had answered so well the answer itself became intolerable. Each teller delivered a different Stephen and demanded Dagon dislike the others. He preferred bread. Bread lied less. Mara worried first, not loudly. Mara's worry became inventory, how much bread could be moved quickly, which rooms had back exits, which men had begun asking names they did not need, where Mary was, whether the child had fever or only heat. "You are packing," Dagon said. "I am arranging. For leaving. For needing to. Same basket, different hands." He knew better than to argue while she tied cloth around dried food. Mary came before noon, that was bad. Mary at noon meant the day had already failed somewhere. "They have taken Stephen," she said. Mara's hand stopped. Dagon stood. "Who?" Mary looked at him. That was answer enough. Not Rome first. Their own, council pressure, temple anxiety. Men defending God as if God had appointed them bodyguards and forgotten to mention mercy. Dagon felt the old anger wake with a familiar stretch. "Where?" "The council. Can we?" "No," Mara said. He turned. She held his gaze. "You do not know what I was going to say." "Yes, I do." Mary said, "Let him go near enough to hear." Mara looked at her sharply. Mary did not flinch. "Someone must know what is being done. Someone foolish, someone roadwise. Dagon liked that better than he should have. Mara did not. "He does not go alone," she said. "No," Mary agreed. "He goes with fear and sense if either will walk with him." Dagon opened his mouth. Both women looked at him. He closed it. Progress. The streets had taken on the morning's neutral light. The neutral light was the worst kind for sneaking, too thin to hide a posture, too crowded to pretend casual interest in a courtyard not your own. The market was open and indifferent. Men sold figs. Women carried baskets. A child argued with a smaller child about the ownership of a stick. No one in any of these scenes knew that, half a mile north, the council was deciding whether to throw stones at one of their own. Dagon walked with his shoulders set the way road men taught each other to set them, not loose enough to advertise, not tight enough to invite. He could feel his hand wanting the knife. His hand had wanted the knife many times in his life and had usually gotten it. He had not yet decided whether today would be one of those days. The old anger was waking inside him in its old way. It came up the back of his neck first, then settled into the small of his back, then began to make its way down into his hands. He had stopped noticing how it traveled in his body decades ago. It was an old companion. He had argued with it many times in his head. Today he did not argue. He needed it for cover. A man walking through a tightening city with his hands relaxed and his face peaceful was a man being looked at. A man walking with old anger in him fit the morning. He took the long way around the southwest corner because he did not want to pass the bakery where the baker would have asked him what the news was. The baker collected news. Dagon did not have any to give that the baker would not have wanted to keep. The alley past the leather workers was darker. The leather worker kept his shop that way for the dyes, and a man could move through it without being noted. He took the third alley because the third alley led to a wall, and there was a place along that wall where he could climb a quarter of the way up onto an old olive-pressed stone foundation, and from there he could see into the courtyard adjacent to the council chamber. He climbed the press. He did not enter the council space. He was not that foolish, whatever Mara believed. He found edges, courtyard talk, men leaving with faces full of importance, servants passing quickly. A boy who had carried water and would trade anything for figs, a guard who knew nothing but enjoyed implying otherwise. Words spilled through doors badly, but enough came to cut. Stephen was speaking history. That was what Dagon heard first, not defense. History: Abraham, Joseph in Egypt. The 70 souls down into Pharaoh's land, Moses at the bush, Moses on the mountain. The 40 years and the bones of the fathers carried out of Egypt at last, Joshua, David. Solomon's temple, the prophets the fathers had killed. The righteous one the fathers had betrayed and murdered. Stiff necks, uncircumcised hearts, the handing on of the law by angels and the keeping of it badly. The temple made with hands and the heaven that even the heaven of heavens could not contain. Dagon did not understand all of it. He knew enough to understand danger. Stephen was not trying to escape. He was placing the room inside the story it claimed to guard. Every name he named was a name the council men had been raised on. Stephen was using their own scrolls against them in their own grammar, with the Septuagint cadences a Hellenist boy would have learned in a Greek-speaking synagogue in Alexandria or Cyrene or the coast. He was saying, in effect, "You have been the brothers selling Joseph. You have been the people grumbling against Moses. You have been the fathers stoning the prophets." The pattern has run in your veins for 1,500 years, and the latest verse of it was last spring in front of Pilate. Men hated that. Most men prefer stories where their fathers are always wise, their buildings always pure, and their anger always defense of God. The noise changed. Dagon stepped back before bodies moved. Good instinct. Men came out with Stephen, not walking him, driving him. There is a difference. A walked prisoner still belongs partly to procedure. A driven man has become crowd property, and crowds are poor owners of truth. They drove him out the gate. The killing place was outside the wall. It had been the killing place for generations. Jewish law required execution outside the camp, and Jerusalem's camp had been outside this northeast gate since the days the wall had been built where it was. The ground there had a particular look. Other places near the city had bushes, the kind that grew where dropped seed had taken hold in soil that had been left alone. This ground had no bushes, nothing rooted easily in a place where stones had been thrown at human beings for as long as the fathers had memory. There were stones already there. There always were. Stones used once for an execution were not, by any law anyone cared to write down, returned to the wall they had been broken from. They lay in their place. Some of them had been there long enough that the dust had settled into the small chips where other stones had struck them. Stephen's face was not afraid enough. That frightened Dagon. He had seen courage before. Courage often looked like clenched teeth, hard eyes, a jaw set against pain. Stephen looked grieved and bright, as if he saw something the rest of them were using violence to avoid seeing. People shouted. Words became stones before hands found actual ones. Dagon moved with the edge of the crowd, hating himself for each step that was not forward. He could not save Stephen, he knew it. Knowing did not absolve the body. His hand wanted the knife. His legs wanted distance. His heart wanted Jesus to step into the road and ruin death again in public. Jesus did not. That was the hardest part. After resurrection, Dagon had expected death to behave differently. It did not. Stones still struck flesh. Blood still came. Men still believed shouting made them clean. The first stone Dagon heard land was not the loud one. The loud one came later when a man got a piece of broken paving over his head and brought it down two-handed. The first stone was small. It made a thin, wet sound against Stephen's left temple. Stephen's head moved a finger's width. He did not fall yet. The second stone hit his shoulder, and the third hit his hip, and the fourth struck the wall behind him and ricocheted back into the crowd and hit a man on the calf. And the man swore and looked at his own leg, as if his leg had insulted him, and went on throwing. The dust started rising from the dry ground where their sandals were kicking it up. The dust got into Dagon's mouth and into his eyes, and he tasted the dry ground of the killing place on his teeth and would taste it for a week. Stephen fell. Dagon heard him speak. Not all. Enough. Forgiveness. Even then. Dagon hated him for one breath, not truly, but because forgiveness from a dying man leaves the living with nowhere comfortable to stand. Dagon remembered being forgiven once on a road outside Sepphoris by his mother. He had been 17. He had taken her brass cup, the only good thing in the house, and sold it to a man at the gate for less than half what it was worth, and used the coin to lose at dice within the same evening. She had found him 3 days later asleep against a wall behind the bathhouse at the gate, and had not said anything to him for the whole walk home, and at the door of the house had taken his face in both her hands and said, "I forgive you," in 2 Aramaic words, and gone inside. He had carried the forgiveness like a low fever for a decade. He had hated it. He had not wanted it gone. Stephen's forgiveness moved into him now in the same way. Then Dagon saw the coats, laid at the feet of a young man. The young man watched with a face too controlled for innocence. His intensity was worse than cruelty because it had discipline. He had the close-clipped beard of a Pharisee in training and the slightly long forehead of a man who spent his afternoons at the feet of a teacher and his evenings memorizing tractate after tractate. His sandals were of the make-a-Cilician Jew in Jerusalem would have worn, leather a shade lighter than the local craft, a strap tied higher across the foot. His eyes followed the stones not with delight exactly, but with approval sharpened by conviction. A man can do terrible things while believing he is keeping the world from falling apart. Saul, someone near Dagon said, the name landed, not loudly, deeply. Dagon stored it the way roadmen store storm signs. Saul, Stephen died. The crowd changed afterward as crowds do, hot to scattered, loud to embarrassed, holy fury to men avoiding each other's eyes while retrieving garments. Some looked satisfied, some shaken. Some already revising what had happened into necessary language. Saul did not look away. That too Dagon stored. There are men who can look at a body they helped make and store the looking against the day they will need it. Most men cannot. Most men, after such a thing, would have to look at a wall, a sky, a stone, anything. Saul could look at Stephen. That was a different sort of dangerous than the cruelty of road thieves or the procedure of Roman soldiers. That was the dangerous of a man who believed. He returned by routes chosen to lose any follower. Mara knew before he spoke, perhaps his face told her, perhaps rooms know death when it enters a man carrying dust. "Stephen?" she asked. Dagon shook his head. Yos, sitting near the wall, went pale. Mary closed her eyes. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Mara stood and began packing in earnest. "Now?" Dagon asked. "Now where?" "First away from men asking names." Mary nodded. "They will come." "Who?" "Saul," Dagon said. Mary looked at him. The room learned the name. It did not like it. That night people disappeared without calling it flight. Flight sounded like cowardice. Scattering sounded like seed if someone wholly said it later. At the time, it was bundles tied badly, children woken too quickly, widows deciding which neighbor could be trusted, men burning scraps with names on them, women hiding bread in cloth under sleeping mats. Mara moved through rooms with terrible calm. She sent one widow with a Greek-speaking family because language could protect her better than sentiment. She told Asher to open his storehouse quietly and not make generosity into drama. She gave Yos a bundle and a task because frightened boys without tasks become foolish. She told Dagon to carry water. Of course, always water. Near dawn, before they left their room, Dagon found the carved bird in the bottom of the bundle. He had not meant to take it out. His hand simply knew where old guilt lived when new grief arrived. Stephen's face would join Elie's now. Not the same wound. Same hand reaching for a place to put what could not be repaired. Mara saw the bird. "Carry it differently," she said. "I am trying." "Try while moving," that was fair. They stepped into the street before sunrise. The city had that cold hour smell, ashes, damp stone, old fear, bread not yet baked. Others moved too, separately enough to pretend separation and together enough to prove the body had not forgotten itself. Mary was not coming with them. Dagon disliked that immediately. "No," he said. Mary smiled faintly. "You have become direct. Come. I have people here, so do we. And roads." Mara embraced Mary. "Not long. Long embraces near danger become traps for the heart." "Find us," Mara said. "If roads allow, make them." Mary's eyes shone. "I learned from you." Dagon looked away. Some holiness still did not need his eyes. Before Mary left, she placed a small cloth in Mara's hand. It smelled faintly of oil. "For the lamp," Mary said. Mara closed her fingers over it. "First," she answered. Then they went. At the edge of the city, Dagon looked back. Jerusalem had become many things to him: enemy, wound, room, fire, bread, beginning. Now it became pressure again. Behind them, Saul's name moved through streets. Ahead, roads opened because persecution had broken the room. Dagon hated that God could use breaking. He believed it anyway. Yos walked near him, carrying a bundle too large for pride and too small for fear. "Where are we going?" the boy asked. Dagon looked at Mara. Mara looked at the road. "Out," Dagon said. "That is not a place. It is first." Yos considered this and nodded as if all maps began badly. The child woke and complained. Mara shifted him. The road received them.